So EJ talked about he saw Godzilla -1 in theaters many, many months ago. I guess it took a hell of a long time for it to get to home video, huh? Like they're doing a big like wait on release, but it's on Netflix now, and so John and I have seen it.
It was one of my favorite pieces of media last year.
How has it aged in your head?
It's still good. I like it.
Like, would you watch it again, like happily?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I liked it for sure. Like it didn't lag for me. It was only 2 hours, like 2 hours and 5 or something. It's got amazing sound design. I think the action in particular was like some of the best conducted pieces of the film. It's really obvious that the director must have he must like be a visual effects artist himself or something. Like he know it's like he really knows his way around. And I think there's only like 3 action sequences. There's kind of the opening one, almost the cold open. There's like a middle one, and then there's an end one. And I remember action films used to be more like that.
Yeah. It wasn't a continuous parade of action. It was like, action events within the film.
Yeah. And that's important because you need to know what the characters are doing in the action sequence.
Yeah. And what the stakes are. And
I was surprised in that movie about how much it let its characters breathe and kind of expand. I found that really kind of refreshing compared to a lot of the stuff that we're seeing lately,
Especially in a monster movie. Like I've never cared about humans in a monster movie. I don't think ever. And so I think that was what kind of the refreshing thing about it was like, oh, it's like this is kind of a nice story, and it's the period piece of it all being in post-war Japan. I thought was really interesting seeing it from like that perspective. Like I like when they brought the tensions in with the other countries. It's like, oh, America doesn't like want to seem like they're like offending the Russians, so they don't want to help out. And
yeah, I found that really interesting. I mean, normally, classically, Japanese made cinema very carefully skirts all of that stuff. Anything talking about the end of the war or talking about any kind of pro-nationalist views from that period that were from before the war. And this movie kind of hits on some of those in a way that I have not seen represented in Japanese cinema elsewhere, because I consume quite a bit of Japanese cinema.
It was it was like anti-Japan, wasn't it, in a lot of ways?
Yeah, it was. It was. It definitely had some fresh perspectives there, and showed me anyway some fresh moments that, while I've seen American films do many times, I've never seen like from a Japanese eye, which I think was really interesting too. Which is kind of a crazy thing to say about a Godzilla movie,
Well, Godzilla, of course, being an allegory for the nuclear bomb in the first place, so it was always kind of an allegorical tale. But yeah, like normally when a Godzilla movie releases, everybody's like, ugh, like I was stuck with these terrible human characters for most of it, and I just wanted more monster. That was like a common critique of the 2014 one that came out, like the Bryan Cranston one. And here you are with a lot of humans and not a lot of people complaining. So it never had anything to do with like, I want more monster and less humans. It was more like, well, make good humans and you'll be fine.
Better writing, better storytelling. Plus, I mean, while some of the way that story is told, some of those plot points are kind of Japanese storytelling tropes, like the woman being kind of out of the movie for a while, not to spoil it too much, but her disappearing and then making a triumphant return, those kind of things. That's kind of a pattern,
Well, maybe we could summarize the overall plot for people who haven't seen it. So it's on the cusp of the end of World War II when the movie starts, right? And we meet like this battalion and a kamikaze pilot who shows up, and Godzilla attacks, totally unexpected, and he kills everybody except for the kamikaze pilot, who ends up having like survivor's guilt because he had an opportunity to shoot at it and he didn't take it. And plus it's like his job to sacrifice himself to save everybody else, right?
Yeah, because he at the beginning of the film he actually was skirting off because he was supposed to kamikaze and he didn't. Then the Godzilla, like a tiny Godzilla, attacks and he could have done something and he doesn't. Yeah, so It's like double skirting your responsibility.
Yeah, so he happens upon a very young lady who has a baby. It turns out that the baby's mom was killed in an air raid, so this young woman took the baby. And, they kind of form a family, but it's awkward because the guy is really hung up on the idea of like, but we're not the biological parents. And it's clear they're in love, but they don't do anything about it. In fact, he feels the need to continuously be like, I'm not the dad and I'm not married to her.
Well, that feels pretty Japanese to me. I don't know.
Japanese and 1940s, right?
Yeah.
And so he goes on he needs a job, and so he ends up on this vessel, this
to do minesweeping, to
mine
clear
sweeping,
mines.
that's what it was. That's what it was. It was just war related. And he ends up with this crew, and they get attacked. So your second big action sequences, they get attacked by Godzilla in this like big dazzling sequence, and then Godzilla makes it to land, terrible destruction, and he has to join a group of guys who think they have a shot at killing Godzilla. He decides he's going to do the kamikaze thing, and then spoilers, it turns out that like he makes the decision to use like an ejection seat at the last second and live instead of kamikazeing himself. I guess while I'm at it, the girl he never marries, like she threw him out of the way during a Godzilla attack. She died, and so he's like bereft about that. And then at the end of the movie, it's revealed that she was just in a hospital bed the whole time with like missing an eye or something.
Yes.
So yeah, the pace is great. Again, the sound design, the inventive camera work. I can actually, so the reported budget is 15 million, but I've heard them say that it's less than that. I actually believe it.
Because there's some like weird compositing. It definitely looks like they were stretching it.
Yeah, definitely. But there's some shots that aren't quite perfect. And I mean, I read an interesting story talking about how when they made the replica for the plane, they couldn't originally afford to do it. And they ended up finding a museum that wanted to buy the replica after they were done with it. And that's how they were able to finance that piece. So really pulling the dollars out, really kind of interesting.
You can kind of see in the way the non-action sequences are shot. It's basically a simple little film, actually.
Yeah.
That's actually perfect for a movie like this, because it means that you can have these kind of more intimate scenes, and you shoot it in almost kind of like an art house film kind of way, get to know the characters really well so that the action sequences are meaningful. And I did a scene study once talking about the Ride of the Rohirrim and Lord of the Rings. And the thing I was pointing out the most is, that movie keeps cutting to the characters and getting their reactions in the middle of the action sequence. And so you're checking in with the characters and you're getting character story information while you're watching the action. And this did a really nice job of that. This like never lets you get away from, because Godzilla, therefore, he's almost not a character. He's just this horrible, terrible threat. And so it's really just about them and what are they, how do we team up and destroy him and stuff. So it's really cool. A bit like, it actually reminded me of Jaws in that sense.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And the sparing VFX so that it's that much more effective when it comes out.
You could hear the radio mics, and they were always saying, the shark is not working. The shark is not working. Repeat, the shark is not working.
Yeah, like very, very Jaws-esque, and a little bit like Moby Dick too. Like he's kind of Godzilla becomes sort of the white whale,
The Godzilla problem is solved when the main character solves his trauma, or gets over his trauma. So it blends those two stories very well.
So it's kind of an archetypical hero story, or as EJ put it once, he was like, take responsibility and decide to live. It's a part of this character's. I was watching. I was thinking like this is like Chekhov's kamikaze. Kind of knew at the beginning of the movie, like this guy's gonna want to fly a plane into Godzilla. I just know it.
Yeah.
But they do something. It's okay if something's predictable. If the reason for it is to tell a story about that person's emotional state. My one major critique, or the thing that maybe is like I bumped into, was, and you're gonna tell me it's because they're Japanese, and like fair enough. But I did think like the acting and some of the dialogue and some of the staging was very like, I don't know any other way to put it besides like telenovela.
Yeah, it's wooden.
It's like a melodrama. Yeah, that was the thing when I first started watching it. I was like, you kind of cringe at first because you're like, oh, we're doing this. But I think I was able to get into the groove pretty easily, and I think because a lot of the like tempo, I've seen enough anime to know that tempo. I think it is just like the tempo that storytelling takes place in Japan. You've seen more than me, John. So
yeah, at moments it was more like a play. It was kind of play acted.
Yes, very much so.
and probably because that's a bigger art form, than movie making is for live action film in Japan. And that's just the way that, like you said, the stories are told at a different kind of pace. But I think that the movie thankfully moves fast enough that you can kind of forgive those strange moments, those moments that come off weird, because you're always on to the next thing. It doesn't have the problem that a lot of Japanese media has, which is it's way too slow. This is not way too slow.
No, totally. The truth is, like, 'cause famously, I don't like anime. Yeah. I like most Japanese movies I see, honestly, like the live action ones. Like samurai movies are super cool, and like I actually do like live action Japanese stuff most. I like Sentai, obviously, but I suppose the telenovela feeling of it, it's not necessarily wrong to present something in that kind of big, broad, especially it's meant to be kind of like like a melodrama or like a soap opera, like it's meant to be like this kind of broad story about an archetype. The example that I keep bringing up is they're on the boat for the first time and the young kid goes, he's like, oh man, I wish like the war, like it wasn't over so I could be part of it. And he like grabs him by the collar and he's like, don't you ever say that again.
Very,
it's a bit
intense.
There were several, like the crazy doctor, all these archetype characters, coming back around,
And I thought like if I could change anything, I thought it was important to keep the girl dead. And the reason would, just from my perspective, is like her death should be enough for him to despair and to give up on the whole thing. And yet there's a child at home and the child represents the future symbolically.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like, you need to be able to live on for that child and that child alone. Now, of course he does, because he doesn't know that she lives until afterwards. I just think that there needs to be like a cost of war, that we feel that like, hey, things didn't get tied up in a bow at the end of this whole thing. I think that would have been better personally.
I think that's actually a Japanese phenomenon that's more recent, is that stories can't be sad. There's a real downturn. There's a real elimination of, even in anime, of really sad stories now. It's I don't know enough about the dynamics of the media industry there, but there's not many sad stories anymore.
Well, there it is. There it is.
I also didn't like the sequel bait stuff at the end either.
Yeah, I didn't like that either.
Oh, showing him at the bottom of the ocean or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the girl has like something like a mass on her neck or something, or something like that.
Yeah, it's cliched.
Yeah, it's like, I don't need, like, you could have just, they should have just ended the story. If you make another Godzilla based on it, make it. Yeah. I just feel like all this.
Yeah, you don't need to link them, right? Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
I haven't seen Shin Godzilla. I think that was like 2016, but people like that too. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll check it out. I like this. It felt like it felt like an older film. Like it felt like obviously it was meant to. It was playing what music I love is that original Godzilla action music. The dun 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 dun.
I loved how they weaved some of that in with the score. They did a really nice job of that. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, the movie did really well in theaters. Like they were originally going to have it just for like a week in theaters, and then they like extended it because everyone wanted to see it. So there's a hunger for stuff like this.
Yeah, like I think like just a basic human story. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's like it's not that hard, I guess.
Without a lot of baggage, without a lot of like. Without a lot of social baggage.
Yeah, or cute shit. Like, like we killed the main character in the first 20 minutes and you didn't know we were going to do that. Like, I destabilized the narrative. Like, all right, enough.
Yeah.
We can just tell a story sometimes. That's okay too. That's like one of those things that I feel like Game of Thrones left us with is like narrative gimmicks, I would call it. So you can't really just kill your main character like halfway through. And I mean, it's a stunt. It's a fun little stunt, but it does disrupt the overall idea of a story.
It feels so tired now.
Yeah.
Why does he keep protecting us?
Maybe because Godzilla is inside each one of us.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.